great nation and the manner in which we live our lives. We are reminded that the 2,977 souls lost on that tragic day were just like all of us, ordinary people from different walks of life going about with their daily routines. We embrace, support, and mourn with the families of those who lost a loved one on that fateful day. All of us will forever remember where we were, who we were with, and what we were doing on that Tuesday morning in September 2001. I would be remiss if I did not mention that among those who lost their lives, there were 343 firefighters, 61 police officers. These courageous first responders were the ones that ran into the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, while others were fleeing from the danger. We also remember and pay tribute to the brave men and women who overpowered the terrorists on the hijacked aircraft and crashed it into an empty field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, preventing further deaths in our nation's capital. We are fortunate to live in a nation where selfless men and women answer the call every day and choose the fire services or law enforcement as their career path. We are also grateful to the men and women in our military who serve stateside and on foreign soil, defending our freedoms, our values, and our way of life. As painful as it may be, it is critical that we never forget and that we teach the next generations about this horrible event. As I look around, I see many who were not born or are not old enough to remember when this tragedy occurred. I implore you to ask questions, read accounts of the events, learn the history, and visit the memorials in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania. I will now call upon the Doral Police Department's Honor Guard to present the colors. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Raul Ubieta, the interim chief of police for the Doral Police Department, who will lead us all in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Star-Spangled Banner will be performed by the choir from Our Lady of Guadalupe Church.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, they proved through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does the Star-Spangled Banner yet wave?
Honor guard, retire the colors.
Forward, march.
I will now ask Father Elkin Sierra from Our Lady of Guadalupe to please come forward for the invocation. Morning, Father.
Morning, thank you. I'm honored here twice to be here and give this invocation because, first of all, I'm a priest at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. I'm a priest in Doral. I'm home. And previous to being a priest, I was a firefighter and paramedic for Miami-Dade County Fire Rescue, and I served several shifts, several times here in Doral. Join me in prayer. Almighty God, 20 years after the horrible attack on our country, we recall those who lost their lives at the hand of evil. Yet despite this tragedy, we recognize that you are a loving and compassionate God. There was no shortage of love on that awful day when citizens came forward to help the first responders. No lack of bravery on Flight 93 when the words, "Let's roll," were uttered. This nation came together as a family in solidarity as we grieved our common loss, a loss we will never forget. Loving God, we ask you to console the families of the innocent victims, and we ask you to continue protecting this country's peace and safety. Amen.
Thank you for those inspirational words, Father. It is now with great pleasure that I introduce you to our mayor, the Honorable Juan Carlos Bermudez. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you very much. You got everybody sit down. Well, first of all, welcome to those of you who are here for the first time, and welcome to those of you who are here who are Doral residents and the first responders. Today is a is a difficult day for all of us because we remember, but there are many families today, families of first responders, families of workers, many husbands and wives, children who didn't know their parents, brothers and sisters, parents who saw their children pass away before they passed away, which is not natural. And I hope that we all keep that in mind, and we pray today at some point, no matter what your denomination is, a little prayer for all those families that today are impacted even more so or more directly. And as Ray said, we all remember where we were on that day, and I think we haven't forgotten. And we will never forget the brave men and women from the police, fire, medical emergency services, the workers who were in the building that day, those that were on the planes, those that were, whether it be in Pennsylvania, as Ray said, that saved lives, or whether it be in D.C. and in New York. I do want to say one thing. Today America is very divided, unfortunately. And, almost everybody here, not everybody, but a lot of you here, if not the majority, are either like myself, who came to this country as a political refugee at the age of 3, because that's what my green card says, political refugee. It's a little 3-year-old kid, better looking back then, with that says political refugee. Or you're an immigrant, or you're a first or second generation immigrant, or an immigrant. This is the greatest country in the world. This is the greatest experiment, not only in democracy, but in respect for the dignity of human beings that has ever occurred in the history of mankind. And I know that today, we're not a perfect nation. No nation will ever be perfect, much like no person will ever be perfect. But we are the best experiment in respecting the dignity of human beings. And today, we have as many, if not more, enemies than we had in 2001. We still have terrorists, and we have dictatorships as close as 90 miles away in Latin America, and in China, and in Russia, that love the fact that our country can be divided, that love the fact that Americans are forgetting that respect for others' opinions, regardless of their political affiliation, gender, race, ethnicity, is what makes this country great. So as we today commemorate and remember those almost 3,000 individuals who left spouses, children, parents, brothers, sisters, let us not forget and let us remember that we must do our part. And I want you to know that I'm very honored to be here today with a number of people. Lieutenant General Croft, you'll hear from him in a little bit. And he and the men and women of the United States Southern Command keep us safe day in and day out. Not only from those individuals, those countries I just mentioned, but there's other ones too. We can add them to the list. I do also want to recognize Trayvon Pierre, who's here from Mayor Levine Cava's office. Thank him for being here. And obviously from Miami-Dade Fire, Battalion Chief Jack Alabre. And that's our fire department, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. So it's our police department in Doral, and it's our fire department. So when we finish today and you go home, say a little prayer for all those families, and say a little prayer for the United States of America. And teach your children, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, or in between, or to the extremes of either side, that regardless of what occurs, today we are commemorating these lives, and we're also remembering that this is the greatest country. But beyond being the greatest country, it is the greatest place in the world where your human dignity, your existence as a human being, as a person who can think freely, pray freely, work in what you want, is respected. So may God bless you. May God bless your families. May God bless America.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is now my pleasure to call Lieutenant General Andrew Croft of the United States Southern Command, who will deliver some special remarks.
Sir, thank you. Mr. Mayor, thank you for inviting myself and Vicki here, and Father, good to see you in person. It's a wonderful day, and I am honored to be here. I thought I'd just relay to you my experience on 9/11, as it will tell you how our nation responded from the U.S. military perspective and a national perspective. At the time of the attack, I had been in the Air Force for 11 years. I was an F-15 fighter pilot. The F-15, for those of you who don't know, is an air-to-air fighter meant to solely designed to shoot down other airplanes. That's its mission, and I've been doing that for 11 years. At the time of the attack, I was an instructor at what's called the United States Weapons School, which is like Top Gun for the Air Force, out in Las Vegas, Nevada. And by happenstance, we had come out to Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida, Panama City, Florida, for a 1 week of training where we're going to shoot missiles and also use the gun on our aircraft to teach our students how to shoot live weapons. And we do this twice a year. So we were on this rotation. We had flown out the Sunday before the attacks. We had 8 airplanes with us. And we got to Tyndall Air Force Base set up. We flew on Monday to do some of our training missions. And Tuesday morning, the morning of the attack, we had already gotten ready for a mission, and we had already briefed our missions, and we gotten dressed, and we're ready to walk out the door to our aircraft, which is sitting on the flight line at Tyndall Air Force Base ready to launch. And we walked up to the operations desk right before we walk out of the building, and we look up at CNN, and there's a picture of one of the Twin Towers on fire. And I asked one of our folks behind the desk what happened, and they said, well, an airplane just crashed into that building. And they said a small airplane. And I looked at the building, and I thought, well, that's not a small airplane, first of all. And second of all, it was clear blue sky, if you remember that day. You could see 50 miles. So there's no way that could be an accident. And I remember thinking that, as I stood there, the second airplane hit. We just watched it happen. And I'll never forget that I'm a major, so I've been in, like I said, 11 years. I turned to the colonel next to me. He'd probably been in 30 years. And I said, ThreatCon Delta, the time is now, meaning the highest level of response the U.S. military would ever go to, like in a nuclear war. That's Delta. That's our highest level of alert. We'd never been at that level probably since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the interesting part is within about 2 minutes, we did it. The base went immediately to Delta, meaning you don't leave the building. Don't leave the building. And I remember this is a singular moment. And at that point, we knew it was an attack on the United States. And I called down, I was the guy in charge of operations, so the flight operations. I called our senior enlisted guy on the flight line who's in charge of getting all the jets ready. His name was Mark Antunes. And I called Mark. I said, Mark, load the jets with live missiles and long-range tanks. Because we knew what we had to do. We knew that our nation was under attack from the air, and we were built for this. And so we knew we needed live missiles to shoot down other airplanes. I never thought we'd do it against our own airplanes. And within 50 minutes, the third airplane hit the Pentagon, which now told us not only was it a singular attack against New York City, this is an attack against the nation, nationwide. So we didn't know where the next target was going to be. Is it Miami? Is it Atlanta? Is it Chicago? That was the threat. So within a couple of hours, our guys have these airplanes completely changed to now do live missiles and fly long range to go anywhere in the United States. And we have air-to-air tankers that are airborne already. And the response was just amazing how quickly it happened. And so we called our command post and said, hey, we're ready to launch. And we're a training unit. And we were ready to go at that point. As it turns out, the base we were on had 75 of the similar fighter aircraft. It's a training wing at Tyndall. They had done the same thing. They loaded all their airplanes. And so by about the evening time, they took us off. So we never launched that day. And the fighter wing we were at took over that mission. And I remember we went back to our rooms on the base that night. It was raining, it's dark, and all night long these jets kept launching. And they're armed with live weapons. And I'm sitting there watching it happen. They're taking off into the dark, afterburner, and I have no idea where they're going. It was eerie. We just didn't know what the next target was, and it was really unclear at first. And if you remember, the president flew from here, was going to go to Washington. They diverted him to Barksdale, Louisiana. Another buddy of mine was flying with the president on the wing of that airplane in a similar fighter as I flew. So the response was just immediate. It was rapid, and we were ready to do it. And a lot of people just never got to see that. And within hours, we had fighters over the major cities of the United States, and we did that for the next couple of years, frankly. And for years, when President Bush would go to Crawford Ranch, we flew 24/7 orbits over his location, day in, day out, for weeks on end. It was a huge effort to try and protect our folks and our nation. And then fast forward to Thursday. So 2 days after the attack, we are told to fly back to Las Vegas. So we have the 8 fighters I have with us, and we have 4 other fighters that are the bomber version of our airplane. And we take off from Florida, and the minute we get airborne, they say you're cleared direct to Las Vegas because there's no other airplanes in the air at all. I don't know if you remember this. There was no airliners flying. So we fly across the nation. We refuel halfway across. There's nobody talking except the controllers from the FAA. They would talk to us, but there's not a single airline flying. And on my radar, I couldn't see a single other thing in the air. The only airplanes at that point were the fighters over our nation's capitals. And I'll just never forget that. It was just an eerie feeling. And we land in Las Vegas, and obviously everything had changed. And from that point on, even though our military was ready, we were not ready for that mission. We're ready now. And I can tell you that after 20 years, we were successful. We've prevented an attack on the United States soil for the last 20 years because our nation is ready. And we're ready today, I'll tell you that. So it's just an interesting perspective from somebody who was on the ground that got to see it. And so I think it's absolutely appropriate that we remember this day for all the first responders that were mentioned. And we've been successful over 20 years to prevent an attack on our nation. And I think it's important that we look at our new generation behind us here. What's the next 20 years going to bring? How do we keep our nation safe for that generation, our children, their grandchildren? And it's the folks behind you that work every day to do this. That's the most important part. And Mayor, to your point, you're absolutely right. We have to provide security for our nation so we have the ability to pursue freedom and prosperity. It's an absolute priority for us, and we will continue to do that. So it is an honor to be here with you today. Thank you for your service, for all those here. It's an honor to be with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. At this point, I call upon our honorable mayor and council members who will now lead us to lay a wreath and take a moment to reflect and pay our respects to those who met their untimely demise on that fateful day.
We're going to do a brief moment of silence. We're going to do a true moment of silence because sometimes people forget how long a minute actually is. So I want to thank my fellow council members, Lieutenant General Croft, all the leadership, Father. He sees me at Mass every Sunday, so I behave well. And we're going to do, it's a small thing, but let's respect for one moment, keep in our prayers all those who passed away on that day 20 years ago. Thank you.
Sir, you may lead the way. This concludes this morning's ceremony. We thank you all for having joined us and paying your respects. Have a great day.